Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly appreciate and want to associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Sherman. He nailed one point after another that is problematic with this rule. He articulated not only the problem, but the effect that it could have on our small businesses in particular and the different markets he was talking about. I applaud him for his remarks this morning. As somebody who was a former regulator for a couple of years and in the banking business for another 40 plus, I appreciate higher capital. I believe in higher capital. I think it's important. It solves a lot of problems. But there is a limit, as Mr. Sherman just said, as to where that line should be. After Dodd-Frank, I'm not a big fan of Dodd-Frank, but it actually worked from the standpoint of having the banks have more capital. And I think the ultimate stress test was about 3 or 4 years ago when we had the pandemic. And we survived that. Our banking system survived that. Our economy survived that as a result of strong banks. And now we're trying to go out here and put more capital in the banks. We're trying to, in my mind, trying to appease the foreign folks, as Mr. Sherman articulated. We're going beyond what they really want us to do. And I think part of this is a result of the 3 banks that failed last spring. It wasn't that the banks were undercapitalized. They would have had to have 25 to 30% capital. They were underregulated. This rule, to me, tells me that the regulators aren't doing their job. And I told them when they were sitting in your chairs right there, this fiasco that happened last spring is 50% your fault because you allowed a business model to exist, go unchecked. You knew it was wrong, your reports show it was wrong, and yet you did nothing. This rule is a way for them to cover their rear ends, it looks like to me. So I asked myself the question, what problem are we trying to solve here? Mr. Baer, can you give me an answer to that question? What problem is this rule trying to solve?
Well, I'll try to be kind. It's wishes on.
You don't have to be, that's all right.
No, I think the genesis of this is that in 2017, agency staff agreed to Basel, and now they're getting around belatedly to implementing it. And there are good arguments for having international standards and some similarities among capital requirements. But what I find what's so perplexing and concerning about this proposal is that's not really what they've done. They've added in almost every case to the Basel risk weights they agreed to. The securities listing requirement that Randy talked about that disqualifies small businesses from access even to a 65% risk weight when the numbers show it should be 30 to 40. Well, that was jettisoned by both the European Union and the UK. And of course, here we have the stress test that they don't have. So I understand the spirit, let's get Basel done, but this isn't Basel.
Mr. Basher, if you would answer that question as well, but considering this fact, I was in a small business committee hearing, I'm vice chairman of the small business committee, and the other day we had a very, very respected economist there, and he said that this administration proposes about $150 billion a year in new rules and regulations, costs that have to be assimilated into the budgets and the services and products that are sold by these businesses, especially small businesses. This is a huge barrier for them, a huge burden for them. And there's no Administrative Procedures Act requirement here, supposedly, that forces them to do an economic study. How difficult is this to really be able to implement this, and should this be a part of an economic study that, with regards to, or should be a requirement of Administrative Procedures Act?
I think that this rule lacks a substantive economic analysis that needs to be observed, analyzed much more substantively. And I think that the effect on small businesses will be substantial. In fact, when I talked about credit cards earlier, I think there could be an effect on actual spending, which could impact small businesses. But in general, I think that with this proposal, and does this solve anything? This is a perfunctory measure. They're trying to follow through with what Basel has proposed, and I think that, but it's, again, that gets to the problem of why are we listening to Basel and not to you all. I do admit that there are certain places in statute where Congress has said, let's do a capital requirement. There's one for 50% for certain residential mortgages, but as a whole, that's not the case. And I still think that because of the uniform application of these rules across categories 1 through 4 banks, that's in direct contravention to S 2155.
Thank you. I see my time's expired. I'll yield back, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman